All right. Good morning, Melanie. Everyone's here, and I just
Good
started
morning.
recording.
Sorry I'm late.
That's all right. Traffic is traffic. It seems like every road that's possibly could be under construction is at the moment. I'm going to start. I just started recording, and I'm going to share my screen. That would probably help. Golly, where did this? I'm trying to figure out where. Oh, here it is. Yeah. They changed the interface from time to time, and I don't know if it's really an improvement or not. They certainly changed where some of the buttons are. All right, can you guys see my screen? Do you guys see a Windows window? All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Rhino 8. And like I said, I'm recording this. As soon as I can log off of Zoom, then the video, screen recording will process. As soon as I have a video asset, I'll upload it to YouTube and then I'll embed it into Canvas for you all. So you can have this and refer back to it between now and tomorrow, within an hour of class ending, I hope. And so let's see, I'm just opening up Rhino. First thing you'll see is that it asks if what kind of units, and if you're doing large objects or small objects. When it comes to creating a new file for us. I'm just going to say large objects and feet. Right? So I'm doing something architectural, so I'm going to go with large objects. And then for units, I'm going to pick feet. I think by default, it selects millimeters, annoyingly. Not if you're using metric system, but here in the US, I guess we use the imperial system. And all right, so first things first, though, right? I open up Rhino. You can see that there's an interface here. There's 4 different windows. Those are called viewports. It's how you can see what you're drawing, but you can see it simultaneously in top view, front view, right view, and perspective view. If I don't want to split the screen into 4, I just want to sort of look in top view and more strategically arrange my screens, I can just double click on the label for the viewport and toggle it to just fill the whole screen, or I can double click it again and toggle back to 4 viewports. Okay. All right. So I told it I wanted a file that the default units were set to feet and inches, basically. But if I want to be careful, and I try to be, what I usually do before I really start doing any serious drawing or modeling is I double check and make sure my units are set correctly, right? So the way to do this, it's a little hidden. I'm in Windows, Rhino for Windows. If I go to the Tools pull-down menu, and almost every option you'll look at here in Rhino is in the Tools pull-down at the very bottom of the menu that pops up, Options. So I'm holding my cursor there. And so if you're watching this recording, of course, we'll go to Tools pull-down to the Options box multiple times throughout this summer. You can see that we basically have a list of all sorts of options here in Rhino, including the view, including grids, notes, renders, units. Here we go. So if I select units over here on the left, you can see that in my model view, I can set my model units to just about anything, from the practical to the impractical. So I have millimeters and centimeters and meters. I have inches and feet. I even have silly things like microns and kilometers and miles and yards, astronomical units, etc. I don't know if that's meant to be a joke or what, but anyway, I just want to make sure this is set to feet. Absolute tolerance 0.01 is fine. And let me just think about that for a minute. Actually, absolute tolerance, I'm just going to set this. I always think of like the worst case scenario. So if I'm looking at 1/16 of an inch, that's 0.0625. So I'm going to add a few zeros here just for fun. Distance display, decimal versus feet and inches. I'm just going to go ahead and leave this, but I just want to make sure this is set to feet. That'll usually suffice. Okay. And go ahead and hit OK. That's because we're working at architectural scale. And so a lot of things will be drawing or at 40 feet or 8 feet or 4 feet or 10 feet. And so, those sorts of, it just helps to sort of set a basic unit that you'll be using consistently. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead, bear with me for a minute. I'm going to minimize part of my Zoom interface here so it's not covering up my screen for me. So I have the 4 viewports here in the middle. I have pull down menus up here at the top, file and tools. And this is fortunately is one of those programs that still hasn't gotten rid of its pull down menus. I don't know why a lot of Windows apps got rid of their pull down menus. So we have file, edit, etc. We have tools, analyze and render. We'll talk about those throughout the summer here. We'll look at some of the tools and analyze, and we'll of course look at some of the render tools. On the left, we have a toolbar with a set of tools. A lot of them have to do with drawing, modeling, or geometrically transforming things that we've drawn or modeled. So we start with points and curves, and then surfaces, and then meshes and solids, etc. All right, so there's a sort of hierarchy there. And we'll talk about that as we go. And then on the right-hand side here, I have a box called layers. If you've ever used any other CAD software before, you can think of layers as ways to organize the geometries that you have. You can sort of put different geometries on different layers. You can turn layers on and off, almost as if you're at your desk. Back in the good old days when I first started my training, my design training, we would use trace paper. And so we could draw certain things on different layers of trace and stack them up and see through them and begin to composite a full drawing. But if I wanted to, I could always pull one of those layers of trace away. And so you can think about layers in the same way, right? We can turn them on or off, lock them so we don't accidentally select something that we don't want to select, etc. Okay. You'll see by default, it has a default layer plus layers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're all set to different colors. Those colors correspond to how the geometries show up in your screen when you're drawing them, modeling them, or looking at them. All right, so we'll just leave that as a default layer at the moment. And then here at the bottom, we have another set of tools. So I have something called Grid Snap, Ortho, Planar, OSnap, Smart Track, Gumball, C-Plane, Auto C-Plane, Record, History, Filter, some of these. All right, so these are like tabs I can toggle on or off. We can see right now that I have Grid Snap, Ortho, and Planar not toggled on. They're not highlighted. OSnap is highlighted. I'm going to unhighlight it. When I highlight it again, then it gives me these options for object snap down here at the bottom. Snapping means that as I'm drawing, if I get close to an endpoint or a midpoint or an intersection, it'll actually snap my cursor to those key points that I probably am trying to line up with, right? As I start to draw. Let's say I draw one line, I want to then pick up where I left off with that one line and then draw another line at 90 degrees. I can turn on my snaps, make sure that I snap to that endpoint from that first line before I start drawing more geometry, okay? Ortho is an interesting one. We'll turn on and off. So what happens, let me just show you really quickly what that means. Don't worry, I will go back, but I'm just going to select this polyline tool, and I'll start drawing things here in top view. You can see I can start to draw any kind of crazy polyline that I want. For a lot of practical reasons, I don't uh, consider this to be a very valuable polyline because it was really uncarefully just sort of free-handed with lots of angles I didn't really measure. Nothing's actually plumb. And so if I turn on ortho, when I start to draw, it starts to confine my drawing to 90-degree increments, and I can change that. I could change it to 30-degree increments, 45-degree increments, 60-degree increments, etc. But that allows me to draw very precisely along X and Y axes, right? So now I can start to draw geometries that actually make a lot more sense. And if I turn on things like Smart Track, I think I have that on. And in my object snaps, I'll turn on end, and I'll turn on, let's see, intersect, and I'll turn on project. Then you can see I can start to line things up. Let me just zoom in here and let me toggle my top view bigger so you can see a little better. All right, here we go. Let's see, auto C-plane. So I have Smart Track on, I believe. Yeah. Project, let's see. Smart track. Smart track will then, if I hold my cursor over this point and I have my ortho on, then it'll allow me to sort of snap carefully and sort of line things up, right? So when I'm done, I can hit enter or escape. That's something to continue to learn, right? What I typically do, I'm a right-hander, so I have my right hand on my mouse. My left hand, I'm usually have my thumb close to the space bar on my keyboard. That's typically another way to hit enter, and my middle finger or pointer finger towards the escape key, right? So I can exit out of commands, or I can hit enter and accept commands, right? So there's a muscle memory to this. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and select all this stuff and hit delete. All right. And I'm still in top view. And let's take a look at these tools now. Let's go ahead and make some basic geometries. Let's make a 40-foot by 40-foot square. Right. All right, so I'm going to move my cursor along this toolbar, and right below the arrow cursor, I have a tool called polyline. And it looks, like a polyline. It has several points and they're connected, connecting the dots with a set of line segments, right? A line meaning I could make, the shortest distance between 2 points. A polyline meaning that I can then start connecting points with line segments, right? Okay, so a polyline. And then it's going to ask me, okay, every time I select a tool, I have a set of ingredients and parameters it's going to ask me for in the command line. So it says, where's the start of the polyline? In other words, it wants a point, right? As we draw lines, the ingredients it needs are points, then to sort of find the shortest distance between, right? So there's the first point. I'm going to just go ahead and click on my screen. I'm going to make sure the ortho is set to on. It's highlighted in this sort of light lavender color. And I'm going to move in the direction that I want. And with my left hand, I'm just going to say 40 and then give the tick mark for feet. Now you can see that I've entered in 40 feet. And now it's asking me my cursor, I move my cursor around. Do you want 40 feet to the left or to the up, to the right, down? So I'm just going to go ahead and move up and hit enter. There we go. And now, okay, sorry, it's still saying, oh, you need to make a 40-foot line segment. So I'm just going to go ahead and click in the direction I want. And I'll go ahead and do this again. 40 feet tick mark. Okay. Now I can move it over to the right and click with my mouse. 40 feet. I'll go ahead and bring it down. All right. Interestingly, I could draw another 40 feet and snap it here, or I could say close up here. Yeah, you can always see that there's some parameters up here I can play around with. I'll just say 40 feet, enter. Now it's asking me where to click on the last segment. When I'm done drawing, or if I close this up, it's already done. But if I'm done, what I need to do to close the command is hit the right mouse button, right? So left mouse button executes, the right mouse button finishes. And what's also fun about this is that if I use the enter key or the spacebar key or the right mouse button, I can repeat the last command, which is always a fun thing that you could do in AutoCAD as well, right? So if you're an AutoCAD aficionado, back in the good old days in the late 90s, early aughts, when I learned AutoCAD, you got really good at just sort of using the keyboard with your left hand and the mouse with your right hand, and you're really quite adept and fast, almost as quickly as a pencil or pen on paper. Rhino is very similar, right? All right, so I just drew a 40-foot by 40-foot box. Again, I had my ortho on, right? So I could draw at 90 degrees, draw on the orthographic axes, X and Y. And I'm in top view right now. Again, by default, you probably have 4 different viewports, right? You can see when I select the square I made in top view, you can also see it, the front view of it, the side view of it, and then a perspective view of it, right? Simultaneously. If I want to just make the top view, if I'm just drawing in top view, right, like in plan, I can just double click that top viewport label. it toggles that window to fill my screen, right? When I'm done, I can double click it again, toggle back to the 4 viewports. I can do that with any of my viewports, right? I could see perspective view, front view, etc., right? Sometimes you're drawing in different orientations, of course. But for now, let's just stick with the top view. All right, let's make some more boxes. I have Smart Track turned on, so I can, and then my object snap is endpoints is toggled on as well as intersections. So you see what happens when I get close to an endpoint or a corner, right? It snaps to it and says, okay, this is both an endpoint and an intersection point between two line segments. Is this what you're looking for, right? Now I can also, because I have Smart Track on, I can just sort of find the snap here and just move my cursor over. Now I can start drawing in a place, but this point is aligned with this bottom edge will be aligned with the other bottom edge that I started with. All right, so 40 feet. I just want you to get in the habit of learning the muscle memory. Once you get this down, it becomes second nature, trust me. Instead of saying 40 feet for the last one, I'm just going to say close. I can say C spacebar because you see the close command up here has a C is underlined, so I can say C spacebar just to enter it in, or I can just click on it. You can see it's a sort of hyperlink. It sort of turns blue, lets you click on it if you need to. So I have 2 squares now. How many squares do I need? Let's go back to the instructions. I've carefully drawn 40 foot by 40 foot square. I actually have 2 of them. I need 4 of them. All right. Let's talk about a few more things here. Right, I could draw 4 more boxes pretty quickly. But since I have 2 and I need 4, I could also just make a copy of these 2 boxes, and then suddenly I have 4, right? So let's talk about copy. A lot of the tools up at the top of the toolbars here have to do with creating new line or curve geometries or surface geometries, right? They're all about drawing and modeling. Further down, they're all about exploding, joining, moving, rotating, copying, doing these sort of geometric exercises with geometries that have already been drawn or modeled, right? So here we create things, here we modify things after they've been created. And so if I go down here, it looks like there's a box that's white and it moves to a box that's blue. That's the move command. And you see this little caret down here at the bottom. That means that when I click and hold that tool, it brings up a whole set of tools. You'll see that there's a bunch of transform tools here, things like move, copy, rotate, scale, mirror, orient, a bunch of different sort of tools here that we can do geometric transformations on geometries that are already sort of created. Okay. Copy is a fun one. And you can see that the command, when I click on it, is literally in the command line, copy. So here's another fun thing about the interface here, just like AutoCAD. There's toolbars, but if you don't remember which tool or which button it is, or you just can't simply find it because it's embedded within a larger sort of set here, if you remember what you're trying to do, you can always start to type it into the command line in your keyboard. I could say COP, it's going to IntelliSense. I'm probably going for copy, and then you can see that there's a lot of different copy commands. I'm going to go ahead and just select that first copy. And again, you look at that command line, right? All of these tools are just that simple algorithms. They need ingredients, they need some parameters, and then they perform the task that you're trying to do. So in this case, when we say copy, it goes, okay, hotshot, select the objects you want to copy. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and drag my mouse, make sure that both of these squares are selected, hit right click to hit enter when I'm done selecting things. Then it's going to say point to copy from. So I'll just go ahead and select this and then point to copy to, and I'll go ahead and make a point out here. All right. So left click, right click. You got it. There's a nuance to this, right? Right click is the same as hitting enter on your keyboard. Okay. When you want to end a command or you've selected something and you say, okay, I'm done selecting, let's move on to the next step. You can right click on your mouse to do enter, right? If I want to repeat the last command, let's say I want to make more copies, just right click again. And it says, okay, copy. Select the objects to copy. I can select all of these, right click, then it says point to copy from, point to copy to. I can make lots more copies. In fact, just for my demonstration, since I'll be going through this step by step and it'll sort of go up back and forth between steps, I'll make several copies here. I have a 4x4 16 square grid here now. All right. So we're really good at that, aren't we? Yay. All right. But there's actually more useful things than just making rectangles and squares, right? Okay. So let's go to our instructions. Once these templates are drawn, they provide a way to divide or split the original squares into more complex shapes. Each square is broken into 2 unique shapes. All right. So with each of these 4 squares, you can see that I begin to dimension these things. Let me just zoom in here a little more so you can see better. I'll just zoom in on that first one. So here's our original square. And what I want to do is I want to break it up into 2 shapes, this L shape, and then this other sort of weird shape or the sort of leftover, right? And I've dimensioned this so that we need to go, 4 feet down. This will be 6 feet. This will be 30 feet. This is 4. This is 24. This is 12. Okay. All right. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. I'm going to show you 2 different ways. Right? So the first way, let's say 4, 24. I'm just going to go ahead and move this window over so I can keep referring to it in real time here without having to sort of switch back and forth and give everybody sort of extreme vomit vision here as I move windows around.
For this assignment, are we copying like those exact shapes?
Yeah, you're copying those exact
Okay.
shapes to start with.
Okay.
Absolutely. So you're following these instructions. So if you're following along, you're already getting started on your assignment for tomorrow. Yeah. So one strategy would be I know I can sort of snap around and draw these things. I'm just going to go around and draw this shape within my original square. I can draw this shape within my original square. Strategy 2 is I can draw this geometry, this additional geometry, and then use it to split and trim my original square, and then I can start to join things together again. Okay. So let's take a look at both. For this top row, I'm going to use strategy 1. I'm just going to go around and make this shape. Okay, I'm going to start at this corner. I'm going to draw a 4-foot line, then a 4 plus 24, so 28-foot line, then 6, then 24, and then 30. All right. I will not remember that. So let me see. I'm going to go back to my polyline tool. I'm just going to snap. I'm going to move in this direction. I'm going to say 4 feet. I can just say 4. I don't really need the tick mark because I've already set my units to feet. Then over here, I believe I said 28. Okay. Then over here, I believe I said 6. There it is. Then this would be 24. And then this would be 30. Then I could go around and finish off this shape. All right. You can see because I drew that as one polyline, all of these line segments are one shape. Yay. All right. I just moved that, dragged that around so you can see it. I'm going to leave it there. And now for the next one, I can just snap and make this little upside down L piece here. And then last but not least, I'm going to go back to my arrow, my cursor. I'm just going to start to try to select those pieces that I made, right? You'll see if it's ambiguous as to, like, let's say there's 2 geometries, two curves, in other words, that overlap, and it's ambiguous as to which one I'm trying to select. They'll give me a menu and ask me, which one are you trying to select? Are you trying to select just this outside one? Or are you trying to select the one that you just drew that has this, right? Okay, so if I select that, I can select that outside one and just delete it. And now I just have these two curves, right? They just happen to nest inside each other. Okay. So that's just drawing new curves inside the original shape. I'll go down here and I'll do the exact same thing, but with the other strategy. Let's say I already know that I have this outside shape. I don't want to draw a bunch of excess shapes. I want to start drawing. It's asking me where the start of the polyline is. I'm going to say 4 feet. Okay, now I can start to draw. So I believe this was 28. I believe this was 6. This was 24. And this was 30. All right, so now I have this curve, this polyline, and I have this polyline. So now what I need to do is I need to break up this outside polyline with this shape, right? So what I can do is I can use the split and trim tools. In this case, I want to split this outside shape with this inside shape. So I'm going to say split. It's going to say select the objects to split. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to select the outside shape and hit enter or right click, right? Then select the cutting objects, the objects to cut that outside shape with. So I'll select this inside shape and then hit enter or right click to accept and to execute. Now I've basically split this outside box by the sort of inside geometry that I've done. Then from here, right, I have 2 polylines. If I want to join these together into one continuous polyline, then I use the join tool, which are these 2 puzzle pieces. The icon with the 2 puzzle pieces being joined together, or I can just simply type in join, right? There we go. All right. That's probably not the smartest move because now I have to go back in and do the same thing over here and redraw that, right? So this method seemed to be much quicker, the first one. And I recommend sort of thinking in terms of that, in those terms. But if you do need a trim or split, right? We have trim and split tools. So that's that. All right. So let's take a look at the next one. The next one is, sorry, I'm working back and forth between the Mac interface and the Windows interface and a touchpad and a mouse. It's like really confusing. Okay, so the next one, 4 feet down, then looks like 22 feet over, then 26, then 20 over, then 10 down. Um, so I'll just go ahead and draw that. I'm going to start here at this top left corner. It's easy for me to remember that. And go down 4 feet. I'm just going to draw each shape at a time here. Then I said it's 22 feet over to the right. Did that really draw 22 feet over? Oh, sorry, that's 32 feet. So I'll draw 10 more feet in this direction. There we go. And then 26 and then 20. Okay, so 26 down, 20. Are you trying this back at your desks? If so, let me know how it's going. And if you guys are already done drawing these things, then tell me and I'll just quickly blow through this. But I do kind of want to narrate step by step as you go. So now I'm just going to draw the second shape and snap around, obviously. And then I'm just going to go ahead and select that original outside box. Now I have this one and I have this one. Yay. All right. I'm going to get rid of these copies for a moment. I don't really need those. Superfluous. All right. Here's a fun one, a square. All right, so we're going to go 10 feet down, 16 feet over. What I could always do is go 10 feet down, 16 feet over. And then, in that command, and now I have a point to then start drawing a new polyline in here for this sort of hole in the donut here. 20 feet, 16 feet. Okay. So 20 feet down, 16 feet over, 20 feet up. Oops. 20 feet up. And then close. And get rid of this little construction geometry thing that I just drew. And I don't know what happened here. Oops, maybe I won't get rid of that thing. Let me just undo this box since I somehow drew it wrong. Aye, aye. Oh, it's because I'm using an Apple Magic Mouse, not the greatest mouse for CAD. It's like double clicking for some stupid reason here. I like Apple, but their mouse is not made for CAD. All right, get rid of that. There we are. And last but not least, just a little, that almost looks like a window in an elevation, doesn't it? Let's see. So we go six feet over, then 32 by 4. Okay. So we'll start 6 feet over. Oops. And go, what did they say? 32? Come on, by 4. Oops. All right. Sorry, my mouse is like really goofy here. Okay. 32. 4. And then 32. And close. All right. Now I also need to draw this shape. Just a really oddly shaped Q, right? Okay. So I don't know where everybody's at, but I'll just move these down so you can see the kit of parts that I have. And I'll make a copy of this donut hole since I need the donut hole in there for that larger piece. Yeah, there we go. So that's the kit of parts that I have. Right. Now, here we're going to use some trim and splitting. Panel A cut into 2 additional pieces, panel B cut into 3 additional pieces, C into 4, and D into 2, right? Doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you conform to 90-degree right angles. So these larger pieces are going to be split into a number of others. So let me just go through the trim and split commands because we'll use split here. So this one just needs to be cut into 2 pieces, right? So one splitting operation. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line, a polyline where I want to do that split. I'll go ahead and do it right here, let's say. I don't know. Why not, right? So now what I can do is I can use that split command, right? There's the tool. Looks like there's a wedge or a knife sort of cutting through an object into 2 objects. But I'm just going to go ahead and type in split. It should IntelliSense that that's what you're trying to do. And then follow the instructions up the command lines. Select objects to split. So it'll be this object that I want to split into 2. Right click when I'm done with that, then select the cutting object. So what do I want to split with? There's the knife, the line, the new line that I just drew. I'll select that and then hit right click when I'm done selecting. Now you can see that I've split this into 2 pieces. And go ahead and get rid of this piece. I'll move this up. I'll close these up. Just going to go ahead and make a new line, snap and snap to the endpoints, snap and snap. Okay. Now you'll see that, this was a part of a polyline that got trimmed. So these are all joined together. This new thing that we made is not joined. Let me go ahead and select all of these at once and type in join to join them so they become one. Same thing here. I can select these together, hit join. There we go. And it tells me that two curves were now joined into one closed curve. That's what I want, a closed curve. All right. All right, how are we doing? Still keeping up? This needs to be cut into 3 pieces, 4, and then 2 again. Everybody doing okay so far? This is
I'm
so,
I'm lost, but I'm definitely rewatching this back just because I've
okay,
never used Rhino or I've
right.
never done something like this.
Yeah,
So
all right. And so, yeah, people are in different boats here, and it depends on what we're going over too. So that brings up a good point. Let's talk about right now before we go too much further, and that is what's due for tomorrow. I want you to try to do one of these by tomorrow. We can look at things and talk about them. We can debug anything, get you over the hump if you're having any issues or difficulties, and then make sure that everybody's set for having a productive long weekend, doing 5 of these. Okay. All right. So that's the goal for today and between today and tomorrow. So yeah, rewatch, try it out, come prepared with questions or come prepared to just show me your model half done if it's not done all the way because you're like, here's where I got stuck and I didn't understand this and the video wasn't clear either. Okay. All right. So that's good. Don't worry about it. Let's see. I might just sort of break this up here and here. And I'll just, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and split. Let's say split, SPLIT. I'll split this large shape with both of these cutting objects. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Now I can get rid of these. I can move this away. I can move this away. I just need to close these up. You know, what's interesting is that there are ways of just taking a polyline that's open and having it sort of take the 2 endpoints and close it up with a segment. Which can be handy if you're laser cutting and you have something that's not quite closing up and not quite sure where because it's almost microscopic. And that is if I go to these tools here. So here I have points, lines and curves and shapes with curves and lines. Down here I have some curve modification tools. And one of these is, let's see, where is it? Right here. Oh, close open curves. So if I just click this and I say that's a polyline, close wide gaps with a line, yes. Boom, closed it up. So there's always multiple ways to go about this, right? Depending on which tools you know and what you're trying to accomplish and trying to find the path of least resistance, right? There we go. All right. We'll do something a little less conventional here. I'll just create a haphazard cruciform shape here, and then I'll do the same thing over here. I'm just going to go ahead and make these components really quickly. Let's see, split. Almost forgot what I was doing. Silly. So I'll split these with these. And I'll split this with this. All right, all right, all right. I'll move these over. Then I'll move these over. Get rid of this, get rid of that. When you select on something, you get these arrows and you can drag the arrows to sort of move them in axes. That's called the gumball. So I have gumball based on the construction plane toggled on. So that's why I have those. That's if you want to turn them off, you can always toggle that off. If they're not showing for you and you want them to play around with them, that's where you toggle them on. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and go around and close these things up and join them. I know it's a bit rote. However, it's good practice to develop the muscle memory between left clicking and right clicking. Again, if you used Rhino or if you've used AutoCAD in the past, I mean, this is a huge time saver once you start to understand how to use that mouse to your advantage. All right, so now I have a full set of parts. There's my 15, similar, not too dissimilar to this. All right, let's just make this bigger. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into perspective mode just to look at this three-dimensionally. I'm going to extrude these into surfaces, into solids, right? So surfaces on the top and bottom and sides. So they become three-dimensional objects rather than just sort of curves out in space, okay? All right, so I'm going to double click on that top viewport because I had it expanded to fit my window. Now I see all four viewports, including perspective. Go ahead and do you see the little arrow next to the label? When I click on that, it brings up a menu. Or if I just right click on the label, it brings up this menu. You can see that there's different display modes. Right now we're on wireframe or shaded. I'm just going to go ahead and turn that in perspective mode. I'm going to turn that to rendered. Yeah, you can see that turn the background white, we can still see the curves. And I'm zooming out with the scroll bar on my mouse. My right mouse button in perspective mode sort of rotates the view around a center point and off in space here in perspective. If I hold down the shift key and do that and use my right mouse button, it becomes a pan. I can just sort of move things side to side or up and down. Okay. And again, if you don't have one, a good mouse with a good roll bar that you keep clean, or some sort of scroll wheel, or that you can sort of zoom in and out of, comes really handy. Also, if you're looking, if you can also click it, that becomes really handy in Revit as well, right? So making sure you have a good mouse for these programs is a real key to sort of saving time and being really productive with the CAD softwares that we use. All right. So we've talked a little bit about some of these polyline tools. Of course, there's polycurve tools. I can start to make, different types of splines and NURBS curves if I wanted to. Just delete that. But if you go down a little further, then suddenly we have something called surface. So we have surfacing tools. All right. Surfaces are like sheets of paper, right? They're infinitely thin. They're sort of have a top and bottom or front and back. They have edges, and the edges are defined by lines or curves, right? Oftentimes they have vertices as well, right? Like for instance, if you have a sort of quad-shaped surface, right, you have 4 vertices, right? Those are points. And so you can see that there's lots of different ways to make surfaces. Let me just show you this. Just pay attention really quickly to my screen. So if I just use the surface from 3 or 4 corner points, I can then begin to click and create a quad. Let me just turn this mode to shaded so you can see that. Right. So now you can see I have a surface. You can see that it's filled in like a piece of paper. So there's an opaque sort of surface inside this shape that I just drew with 3 or 4 points. This is a good one, surface from planar curves. We happen to have a bunch of closed planar curves right here, right? So if I just want to fill this in with a surface, I can use that tool. That's kind of a nice one. Oh yeah, look at that. Just going to undo that really quickly. I'm not ready for that. There's several sets of tools here that become useful, and we'll talk about them more and more as we go. Loft will sort of skin in between a set of cross-sectional curves. So if you have, let's say, a set of profiles, think of, let's say, a complex shape like the inside of a boat. You know what I mean? Like a canoe. And have you ever seen the frame of a canoe? You see the sort of ribs. Let's say we drew the ribs. Then we could actually loft a surface around them to create the sort of geometry of the canoe, right? There's extrude. I think we all know what extrude means, right? We have a shape, then we have a direction, and we can extrude it along that direction. So let's do extrude really quickly. Let's say I have an extrusion. I give it a shape, a profile, and I can extrude it in a direction, right? And create a surface. What's nice about this with extrude for our purposes is we can change the direction that it goes in, and we can tell it just how far to extrude, right? With an extrusion distance. And we can say, do we want to turn it into a solid and cap the top and the bottom as well? So you can see that there's several options here when we use extrusion, and that's what we're going to use for this, these next steps. We're going to extrude these things. So I just used the extrude tool, and what I did, again, here's the surface creation tools. If I click and hold, then I get a whole list of tools you can play around with and experiment with, okay? However, we know we're going to use extrude. So I'm just going to start typing in extrude into the command line. It's funny when you do extra, and it says like, do you want to extract? Do you want to extrude? Do you want to? So let's put in that U, extrude curve. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and extrude this curve, these curves. I can select them all at once, which is kind of nice. Let's just do one for the time being. Just zoom in, you can see, just zoom in on this one. I'm going to go ahead and select this curve. When I'm done selecting the curves I want to extrude, I right click, I'm done. Okay, now it's going to ask me for a bunch of parameters, right? Like extrusion distance. How far do I want to extrude? Let's look at this. And I believe I gave you the instructions. Extrude each as a solid 1 foot, like sort of 1 foot thick. All right, so 12 inches or 1 foot. Since we're using um, feet as a unit, we can just type in 1. But let's take a look at some of these other options, right? They'll tell us the direction we want to extrude. We can change that direction. By default, since we drew these in the XY plane, then it's going to try to extrude in the normal direction to that plane, in the Z direction. So that's kind of handy. That's why I wanted to draw on top view anyway. Okay. If I say solid and I click on that, you see how it's turning blue, saying, prompting me, I can actually click on that. I can toggle that to yes. And that means that when I extrude this, it'll also actually cap the top and the bottom and make a solid. So now I'm ready to say, okay, the extrusion distance, I can type in 1 and hit enter. And now I have something extruded 1 foot, and that's a solid now. And if I go back to rendered mode, right, you can see that it's just sort of a white clay surface. I'm going to go ahead and undo that because I can extrude multiple curves at once. And since they're all going to use the same parameters, I'm going to say extrude again. I'm just going to select all these curves at once. I want to make sure that solid is toggled to yes. Since I last toggled it to yes, it's still on yes, so I don't need to click it. I'm going to type in 1 and hit enter. And there we go. Now I have my components. Yay. All right. So that's how I can extrude. All right. Now we need to reassemble the parts. And these are the sorts of kind of results you would expect to get, right? All right. Now be really careful here because I did give you some parameters like, again, the dimensions of our site and studio. So 144 feet deep, 48 feet wide, and 60 feet tall or high. So let me go ahead and enter those in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a sort of volume that we can that then I can sort of work within. So I'm going to go ahead and instead of using rendered mode, I'm going to go ahead and turn this to ghosted or X-ray. You can decide which one you like better. Maybe I'll do X-ray to start with. So I'm in perspective mode and I'm doing that. And again, I can draw orthogonally in perspective mode. So I'm going to draw another polyline here. I'm going to draw basically the site. So what did I say? 144 feet, 48, 144, and then close it up. And then maybe I'll just make a copy of this curve. Since I want to make it a copy in Z, I'm going to go in the front or top view. going to type in copy for that command. And then I'm going to select a point out here in space. And I'm going to move that point up. Now it's going to say copy from and copy to. I'm going to say 60 feet and hit enter. And since I wanted to move up in Z, I'm going to use the front view in order to tell it that. So now I can sort of see a volume to work within, right? That sort of represents the site, right? Here's the sort of footprint of the site. Here's the top footprint of the site. And if I wanted to, I could then draw a few more lines and snap and snap, snap and snap. So those give me some edges to work within, right? As I begin to arrange and compose these pieces in. Now, it's not lost on me that later on you're going to make 5 of these sort of models. So maybe I'll make a copy of these that I don't. I'll keep those in a sort of reserve pool over here. Like by COPY is the command again, copy. Shall we move and rotate? Yeah, let's do that. All right. The commands for move and for rotate are exactly what you'd think, right? If I start to type in MOVE, boom, it asks me, okay, select the objects to move. I can select this. Let me just get rid of the, make sure I'm selecting, there we go, that extrusion. Then the point to move from, and the point to move to. So let me just zoom in here. I have some snaps on. So I'm going to go ahead and select this corner. And now I'm going to maybe, I'll start with a midpoint up here. Why not? I'm feeling particularly. And I'm going to turn off planar. I'm going to turn off ortho for a moment. I'm just going to try to snap to a midpoint on this. There we go. Oh, yeah. Right. So this is a way I can begin to arrange things. Let's say I want to make this a vertical face that snaps in here and moves downwards. All right. So there's several ways to do this. And I imagine just take a look and see if you can follow me here for a minute. First of all, I'm going to turn ortho back on right down here. And you notice I have gumball turned on. So you can see that not only do I have arrows to move, but I also have rotation handles to move in particular axes. So this is a quick way of freehanding this with some precision. Oops. And just moving it 90 degrees. And then I can move and snap. Just make sure I'm connecting the right point. I'm going to really snap to that corner. And then snap it. I can zoom in with my mouse scroll wheel and snap it to that corner. You know, it really bugs me that it doesn't line up with this. I'll fix that here in a minute, right? I mean, come on, we're architects, right? We want to be architects. We want things to line. Oh, it just drives me crazy, right? So you have some creative license here to ad lib a little bit, right? Let's say you need some more parts. Make a few copies, right? I don't mind. Don't tell me, I'll never know. um, let me just show you how else you can rotate these things, right? If you use the rotate command, right? Let's say I want to rotate this in space. What I can do is I can go to the side view and use the rotation tool, rotate. It says center of rotation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the right view because I want to say the center of rotation's there. And then I can say 90 degrees. I could type in 90 degrees, or I could say the first reference point. And then with my ortho on, I can move this up 90 degrees up and click and just move it up. Right, so you can see that if I'm rotating, I can look at that rotation axis, move to the correct front or right view, and then rotate it in that axis, right? In the x-axis versus the y-axis, depending on which view I'm in. Okay, but anyway, back to this. Let's say I want this to align, right? I'm just going to do a scale. But instead of just saying if I just do scale, and I just scale this, let's say I do this, I can say, here's the base point, and scaling from, or the reference point, and scale to. I'm scaling in 3 dimensions, so it's also getting taller, and it's also getting thicker. If I want to avoid that, I can just do a scale 1D, just scale in one direction. Now I can say, here's the base point, here's the reference point, here's the target point, and I can just sort of slide it over. And it just scales in just that, in this case, the x-axis, right? So I can then start to move these things up. If you want those alignments, but you can't figure that out and it's sort of goofing up, don't worry about it. Just tell me tomorrow. We can do it step by step together, okay? So tomorrow will be part troubleshooting and part work time, right? You can get a head start on your weekend project, okay? All right, here we go. Now, it's not lost on me that, hey, sometimes you probably do want, something that could be thicker as well as sort of stretching through the project, right? Again, I wouldn't do this for everything. However, let's just take this. This is a pretty plain vanilla surface, right? It's like a rectangle that's extruded. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly rotate it. Oops. I accidentally moved it instead. I'll just rotate it this direction. And I'm going to place it. I'm going to move it. I'm going to go midpoint. And I'm going to go midpoint over here. Oh, yeah. Look at that. Now, let's say I want this to be a big structural surface, like a big load-bearing thing that you can frame out from, that stretches from front to back and all the way up through the site, right? This one time, I'm going to take some creative liberty here, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to say scale. I'm going to say scale 1D. I'm going to be very particular here. 1D. And again, I'm just going to make sure I'm snapping to midpoint here. Then I'm going to take it all the way back here. All right. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but in the Z direction, select the object to scale. Since I already had that tool selected once, I can right click just to re-execute the command again, just repeat the last command. So I didn't have to retype it. I want to make sure I want to be absolutely sure. See how I snapped there? So I want to use that scroll wheel and zoom in and zoom out as needed in order to make sure I'm snapping exactly where I want to. And I'll snap there, right? And then if this thing's structural and it's going 100 some feet back and really tall, 60 feet wide, tall, maybe it needs to be a little thicker than 12 inches, right? Okay, so this is another way I could scale 1D, where I could scale and thicken this thing up just a bit. Now, if I scale from the center, look at that, it's going to scale symmetrical, right? And I'll just go, let's say another foot out, right? So now this thing will probably be 2 feet thick. It'll be thicker, right? And what I can do is, if you really want to, you can try this out, right? Give these things a hierarchy, right? Now I'm starting to talk about a structural hierarchy here, right? This is clearly taking some loads from the side and bringing them down to the ground, right? And if I had, let's say, 2 of these, and again, I don't mind if you ad lib here a little bit. And suddenly I have 2 big load-bearing walls. Let's say I can put some vertical circulation, let's say some switchback stairs or something, or ramps in here. I could thicken them up and then actually put some holes, punch some openings through them, then frame some things out from them. Then maybe I need to look out here and see, okay, if I'm cantilevering out too far, then maybe I need to make some other sort of adjustments, bring things down to the ground out there. But right, so you can begin to play around with these things. What I don't mind is if you're starting to develop a logic based on an idea, and you can describe that idea. Okay. I do want you to stick to 90 degrees and planes. Okay. But if you do want to sort of thicken some things up in places, try it. Why not, right? Again, the mantra here is try, fail early, fail often, because we learn from that. Okay. So anyway, And don't be afraid to share some of the failures because everybody learns from those, right? You might be the one generating a lot of failures and feeling a little lost in the first assignment, and you might be leading the pack in the second one. You never know, right? So let's say I pull these out and manipulate them. You know, what's interesting is that I'm not too far away from actually generating a hole in these big load-bearing walls if I wanted to, right? So you could even punch openings just like you can trim and split with curves. You can also do the same thing with surfaces, right? Or with surfaces and curves. Anyway, we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. How late does this class go? Like, this is the most unintuitive times. Are we over?
Quick question.
Let's see.
So
It ends at 11:35. Okay, sorry. I cannot remember what the meeting times for this class is. That's why I have calendar invites, just to keep me on task so I don't, you know. All right, yeah, sorry, Anna, go ahead.
can we change the original size of the pieces when we move it into the
Yeah, as you start, yeah, exactly. See how I'm doing? I'm ad-libbing here.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah, as long as you follow the rules of sticking inside this volume, 144 by 48 by 60, I don't have any problems with you trying that now. In particular, if you have some interesting ideas, try them out between now and Thursday, and we can talk about them on Thursday before you spend a lot of time over the weekend doing 5 of these. Yeah. So yeah, I would say try some things, right? Don't be afraid to break a few rules, but the rules I don't want broken are try to stay within 90 degrees. Okay. I don't want a bunch of crazy angles and I don't want a bunch of crazy curves. It's just not helpful at the moment. Okay. So stay planar and stay in 90-degree increments. But yeah, I don't mind if you make some ad libs and again, make some things line up or make some things purposely not line up, right? You can always think ahead. And again, for the weekend, for the 5 that I ask you to do over the weekend, right, you can always start to think about these terms now and how you begin to react to them. What does your brain think when you see balance or imbalance, right? Can you have something that's balanced, let's say from left to right, but isn't symmetrical? I would argue yes, right? You can have a composition that's balanced weight-wise without it being entirely symmetrical, right? You can think about symmetry versus asymmetry, right? What would it mean if you're just working on one side of this thing and then you just basically take everything that you had and mirror it for perfect symmetry, right? So you can play around with these tools. And oftentimes you'll see that they align with particular geometric tools in Rhino in this case, right? Movement and rhythm or repetition and variety can begin to mean sort of developing some modules and repeating them, right? That could be a copy or a copy and rotate or a copy and move or you know, there are tools called align tools, and there's also tools called array, where you can begin to sort of say, I want to array these along multiple versions of this module along a path, right? So you can begin to play around with these things. Use your imagination if you'd like, right? Make this fun, right? Make it fun. Have fun with this. There's really no right or wrong. What I'm curious about is you articulating what was going on and why you made some of these decisions as you know, when you were making them, you know, later on. And we can start to mine for really strong conceptual ideas. Okay. Right. Design is a lot of just producing some things, but then having a critical eye to look and say, well, which path do I really want to go down and what's going to be most productive, right? So that's why we'll start over this weekend doing 5 things. We'll slowly pare that down to one thing, doing one thing really well. Okay. All right. Last in the next week, we'll talk about some maybe tomorrow if we have some time, but we'll pick this up on Tuesday next week. We'll start looking at the display modes and we'll start to create our own custom display mode in Rhino, where we can give it the rendered mode, but we can also have it to draw edges, and we can even start to define line weights and things like that. We can turn on hidden lines and things like that. So we'll start to develop our own sort of viewport modes. So you can begin to generate a set of axons. We'll bring those into Photoshop or Illustrator and begin to add some silhouettes, things like that. So what you'll find is that The key to this is not necessarily knowing what each button does in every piece of software, but oftentimes the currency is how do you move from one software to the other while maintaining the sort of data-based fidelity of the model or the image as you go back and forth, right? So that's usually the hardest part, honestly. If you can't find a particular tool on the toolbar, there's Google, there's me, or there's a command line. Just start trying to type it in and see what happens, right? Okay. So some of you will fail multiple times between now and tomorrow morning. And that's not unexpected at all. I'd be really surprised if everybody came in and didn't have any questions, have any hiccups, or have anything that we need to quickly go back over and debug, right? So take this with a grain of salt. Try your best and come prepared with any questions that you need answered on Thursday. Excuse me, I'm getting really dry. I'm going to conclude the demonstration. I'm going to stop recording and stop sharing. Let's see. Where's stop recording?